gentlemen. Welcome to the Kankakee Area Football Podcast. Today, I'm Steve Soucie, joined today as always, by Mason Schweizer. How are we doing today, Mason?
Doing great, Seuss. How are you doing?
Oh, not too bad. Just still trying to sort out that chaotic week one and try to get a full picture of what happened there. Lots of crazy results and lots of interesting stuff to break down. And of course, today we'll continue focusing on Kankakee Area football. Let's just dive right in and start once again where we started last week. I was thinking that Bradley would have, maybe a little bit more of a test from TF North, but they really flexed their muscles quickly in that one. And what were your impressions? What were your takeaways from the Boilermakers this week?
Well, in talking to Adam Tamino, who was covering that game for us, really it was the defense. We talked so much, you and I, especially about how much firepower this offense has, and we kind of overlooked how good that defense is that returns a bunch of starters as well, holding TF North to 2 first downs that starting defense did in 3 quarters, and that 5 different guys scoring touchdowns. I think that's noticeable too. Ellis Johnson looked great, and his first start as the guy at quarterback, threw a couple of long touchdowns to Calvin Cole and Lizel Edmond ran one. Kyron Edmond found the end zone twice, so I think the Boilers saw exactly what Coach Mike Cole was hoping that he was going to see out of them.
Interesting week 2 game for Bradley, with Crete Monee, a talented team, even though they came out of the gate with a loss. That loss was to a really good Richards team. What are your anticipations or what are your thoughts on that particular matchup in week 2?
Like you said, I was a little shocked to see that Richards was able to get, ahead of Crete in a shootout kind of game. And yeah, these are like 2 of the most explosive offenses at, south of Cook County. Like both of these offenses can get it and go. Darren Couch, Dorian Patterson, Jeremiah Stonewall, who's transferred in. That's a great trio right there. At home, I know you know this very well. How many times have you heard even guys like Coach Vonar at Lincoln East say, Bradley Bourbonnais is just a very, very tough place to play. So I think the Boilers having that home crowd advantage to them will certainly help, and that might be one of those first to 40 type of games.
Switching gears, Friday night, I took in a little bit of this game. You took in the entire marathon, the Kankakee Nazareth game on Friday night. I don't know what your impressions were over the course of the whole game, but it felt like both teams really had a hard time finding their rhythm on Friday night, on both sides of the football, at least while I was there. Now, granted, I left early, but what was your impressions of that game in general?
I think, both defenses shined early, as, is the case in a lot of week 1 games, as offenses still get the kinks worked out. But with the K's, you look at a kid like Cedric Terrell III, who we've talked about a lot, and you saw the home run that he hit on the 3rd play of the game, an 87-yard touchdown. He had a pick too, but the K's, Coach Ed Hazlett told me at halftime that they were getting tired up front on both sides of the ball. And I think you could really see that by the 4th quarter. But man, you look at Naz, I know that they're not in our area, but I know they're also a big school to look at. And what they're doing, kind of coming off of losing who they've lost after these 3 state titles, new quarterback. Curious your thoughts on how the 2 did. Jackson Fela, the transfer, he came in and threw a couple big touchdowns late. But that game, like you said, it was both teams struggled offensively for a while, and then Naz got a couple big home runs that came off of interceptions that their defense forced, and that kind of that turned a tie game into a 3-score game there in the 4th.
Yeah, I was kind of watching that game out of the corner of my eye after I got home, watching the remainder of it, and it felt like Nazareth looked a little more Nazareth-y, if that makes sense, in the second half. Like the kind of things that they typically tend to do. They were clicking a little bit more. Like you said, the quarterback came in and made a couple of throws there in the second half of quality, and they looked a little bit more like the Roadrunners usually look like later in that game, and that's what they tend to do. They tend to be the kind of team that kind of frustrates you for a while, and then when they have the opportunity to kind of put you in the hurt locker, they tend to do that. Yeah. So, but now, once again, Kankakee, I've said this before, tons of respect to what they do schedule-wise. They realize that they are an elite team in the Southland Conference. They're probably not going to get a lot of tests in the league play. So they have 3 non-conference dates. They don't fool around, and they took that to the extreme this year with adding a trip to Lincoln Way East here in week 2. I mean, I know that I don't expect Kankakee to win this football game. I don't know if I even expect them to keep this competitive. What does Kankakee hope to get out of this game?
I think it can be closer than people think. The K's have the firepower to go with anybody in the state. They've got as good of athletes on their team as anybody in the state. The real test for them, especially against a team like this, can you sustain it for 4 quarters? They got a little banged up last week too. But this is a really good test for this defense, especially. I mean, I heard the praise that you heaped for Jonah Williams when you were on with Mr. Rodewald Friday night. Yeah, that's going to be, talk about a measuring stick. That's the highest standard. The bar doesn't get much higher than that. And, like you said, this is a great, tough schedule. A lot of people might be like, why on earth would you open the season against 2 defending state champions? I think it's great. I mean, you want to be the best, you've got to beat the best. I think it's Mr. Wilcox, athletic director at Kankakee, I think a great job of setting up this early season slate, which also in a couple weeks includes normal community. Don't forget that too.
Right. Yep. So, all right. Well, on Saturday afternoon, I took in about a half of this. You took in a whole thing again. Bishop McNamara with a resounding victory over, let's be frank, an overwhelmed Lawrenceville team. They had difficulty matching up in this one. But all that being said, a really, really good sign for Bishop McNamara that they were able to dominate in the way that they did, because this is the kind of, a year or 2 years ago, yeah, maybe McNamara wins this game, but they don't win it in the convincing fashion that they did on Saturday. I was pretty impressed with what I saw, keeping in mind that obviously the level of competition moving ahead is going to step up significantly than what they saw on Saturday.
100%. The only thing though, these 2 teams played last year is a 21-0 game. And I think the offense the last 2 years just never found an identity under former head coach Bob Kelly. And then that first drive Saturday, and they're marching down, and then you have a tipped pass that ends up getting intercepted, and Lawrenceville's got the ball, and all of a sudden you're like, oh no, not again. And then boom, 50-something points. 58-0 was the final. I know they scored so many points, I didn't even have the right score out in my video when I put it out. But yeah, I think it was really unique to see that this new offense, kind of a spread option heavy, a lot of jet motion where you can either hand it off on a jet sweep, you can hand it off inside. If you're the quarterback, you can keep it. And speaking of quarterbacks, they've still got that 3-headed quarterback battle, Carter Krutzinger, Michael Lee, and Gavin Antons. I'm really curious to see how that shakes out. And things are going to be a lot tougher this week against a real physical Herscher team, and what's going to be a classic matchup. I know you've gotten to see a lot more of those matchups over the years than I have.
Well, it's kind of a recently renewed rivalry. You have to go, there weren't a lot of those that has happened over the last, 15 to 20 years. They met one time in the playoffs, I want to say. I remember it specifically. I don't know the exact year, but I remember Herscher's defense completely shutting down now, Jonathan Ward, a player who's, in the NFL. So, so that's just one of those things that, that's a rivalry that runs deep. The communities are fairly close together. So it's definitely one that has a little juice to it, even though it hasn't been as consistent over the last maybe 15 to 20 years as maybe a lot of people would like. So should be fun. That's an interesting week 2 matchup. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. Last week we transitioned to a different conference, but I'm going to go to the Vermilion Valley right now because I was pretty interested in a few of the results that we got there from local teams. Let's start with Clifton Central. That was a team that heading into this game, I thought that this would be a tremendous measuring stick for them. And granted, they had some fortunate things go their way early on in the game, but to their credit, they took advantage of it, took complete control of that game, and won comfortably, which was something that I thought Central could win. I did not think it would be a comfortable victory for the Comets. What were your impressions of that?
Yeah, I was kind of the same way. I mean, that not only did they win, they led wire to wire, returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown, and didn't trail that entire game. And, when I was putting together our VVC previews, And Bryce Deno was the one who ran that kickback, by the way. When I was putting these previews together, and Coach Dodd down at Bismarck was talking about how we've got a lot to replace and things, but they had a lot of kids back on defense, and that's a program who at this point the players, they can keep replacing them, and things have continued to be successful. So yeah, like you said, I just was shocked to see the fashion in which the Comets dominated, but heard a lot of good things about them over the summer. And I think week one, they proved that they're kind of the team to beat in the VVC. And you talk about great rivalry matchups like Mac and Herscher. I mean, Clifton Central and Moments this week, it's not going to get a whole lot better than that in the VVC.
Well, let's talk about Moments for a minute. I guess I wasn't shocked by it, but a little surprised with the overtime loss to Oakwood this week.
I'm kind of in the same boat. Cameron Lee's done a really good job down at Oakwood. He was at Iroquois West for a brief while. And he's got that program down at Oakwood turned around. And I think for Moments, there's a lot of youth around a 4-year starter in Eric Castile, and they're just waiting for that youth to kind of get up to speed. A lot of sophomores on defense and the skill positions, even some freshmen that they're getting out there together. So I think it's going to take a little time. And again, a tough test going to Clifton now this week. But once things get going, I wouldn't be too worried about Moments, even through an 0-2 start potentially this week. I think that there's plenty of time for them to right the ship, and there's a lot of room for that team to grow.
Shout out to Iroquois West, getting on the board with a W after the 0-9 season last year. Have you been able to pick up any information about what happened against Hoopston?
Well, I know that Aiden Miller, the big sophomore quarterback that I talked about, I know he had a big interception. But yeah, that's an 11-game losing streak that the Raiders snapped. Just their second win since the start of the 2023 season. And against a Hoopston team that I kind of thought might be a bit of a under-the-radar challenge in the VVC. But a really good start for the Raiders. Their defense was awesome. Both of their senior leaders in the backfield, Julian Malgoza and Christian Gaitan, were able to get to the end zone. So yeah, really cool, really exciting time right now for the Raiders.
Watsika, a little bit of a disappointing loss, I would think, to a Georgetown Ridge Farm team that's kind of struggled to get itself going over the last couple of years. The Warriors obviously have some building to do, and a little bit of a disappointing start for them, I would think.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised. They ran for almost 200 yards, but could only find the end zone twice. So they're going to look to finish off some drives. They play Iroquois West this week in Watsika. So I think, Watsika having 5 experienced starting linemen, maybe they can solidify things on the ground a little bit more, maybe get an early lead and take the wind out of the sails of the Raiders. I think that's going to be their key. But yeah, like you, I was a little bit surprised, and we'll throw a little congrats to the Buffaloes who have fallen on some hard times in the last few years. That's got to be a really exciting win for that community down there last week.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here to get some words from our sponsors, and then we'll come back and talk a little Illinois Central 8 football.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at
I like Reich.
I like Reich.
Since 2016, it's been my privilege to represent the people of the 63rd District. I want to continue representing you as an independent voice in Springfield.
I like Reich. We like Reich.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brinton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
Welcome back, and now we'll transition over and talk a little bit about the Illinois Central 8. Well, let's start at the top. I mean, I was heading into this game with, wondering how Wilmington would respond to the interesting challenge that Morris provided, and I was trying to talk myself into all week long picking Wilmington. I had the gut instinct that I thought Wilmington might be able to win this football game, and I thought that I was like, well, I'm going to be wrong because I did end up picking Morris, and Wilmington scores with 4 minutes left, and I'm thinking they're going to do it. And I wasn't even the least bit surprised that they potentially could do it. But Morris said, hey, not so fast. And they had 4 minutes and ran that extended 2-minute drill to near perfection. scored with under 20 seconds left in the game, and edged out Wilmington 27-20. Once again, it's a loss on Wilmington's ledger, but I think it's a really, really scary loss for everyone else that has to play Wilmington over the course of the rest of the season.
Yeah. What happened the last time Wilmington lost a week 1 game? Didn't they go on and win that year?
Yeah.
A couple
Yeah.
after
Yep.
they lost to Seneca.
Yep.
Very well, especially if the Wildcats end up in 2AB. Kind of another similar situation. A Morris team that really, I think, in 4A, probably even maybe Class 5A, going to be a real tough out. To put up a fight like that against them. And, obviously Coach Reen's going against his alma mater. I know he would have loved to have gotten that one. But I really think if you can play Morris to within a score and to be winning that game in the closing seconds, I think you've got to feel pretty good about your chances the rest of the year. Obviously, they would have loved to win. Wilmington's a place where they don't care. They could be going in to play Lincoln Way East, and they're going to think, hey, we can win this football game. We should win this football game. So they're not going to be satisfied with the loss, obviously, but I think that they showed that they're just as good as they've always been. Yeah.
Yeah. Coal City, an easy win over Pontiac week 1. We talked a little bit about Coal City. How do they replace this? How do they replace that? I don't know if this was a great indicator of exactly where Coal City is. I think week 2 will tell us a lot more with their trip to Richmond Burton. What were you able to kind of pick up on from what Coal City was able to do in week 1?
Well, just glancing over the stats, I think it's kind of a good thing that we didn't see any one player dominate. Logan Natashuk ran for over 100 yards, had a couple touchdowns. Connor Henline had a nice day passing. But I think it's really key for them to not look at losing an all-time great running back like Landon Benson and say, hey, who is our kid that can replace him? You're not going to replace him with just one kid. And they have a wealth of talent. So I think the fact that they realize, hey, we're not going to just be able to throw one kid in the backfield and be the new Landon. They, are going to be able to spread that around. I'm really curious. So I think you probably have a little bit better knowledge of Richmond Burton, specifically this year. But I saw these two teams match up in a Class 4A semifinal. That was 2018? Has that been that long already? 19?
Yeah.
And man, I that's just two very respected, very powerful programs, kind of in that small to mid-size range. I think that's one of the best matchups in the state this week, especially in kind of that size range.
Yeah, definitely. When I saw that on the schedules, my immediate reaction was, whoa, here we go. I mean, that's just one of those things where, Coal City had played Morris over the last couple of years. They switched that up on their schedule and did some different things in their non-con. And when I saw that it was Coal City and Richmond Burton, I'm like, I don't know if you could find a more intriguing 3A, 4A type of non-conference matchup where there are two programs that you have high expectations from on a year-to-year basis. Those are the kind of matchups that we don't really get in the middle classifications. They don't tend to happen very often. So very intriguing on both ends. Richmond Burton, a tough place to play for an opponent. And I think Coal City is well aware of that. So yeah, that's one of the week 2 games that just kind of pops off the page at me. Well, you had actually sent me a little bit of a note on this one as I was leaving Kankakee on Friday night concerning what was happening to the Herscher Tigers in terms of early in that game. Fell way behind in a game against Canton that, to be totally honest with you, I thought was a game that Herscher would probably win, and maybe a little bit easily, to be honest with you. And they were down early 24-0 in that game, but roared back to win that thing with a powerful second half. And I was really, really kind of surprised to watch that game develop. I got a little bit more information about it after the fact. I saw some of the Herscher guys over there scouting Bishop McNamara on Saturday, and I asked them, what the heck happened? And, Alec Draper and I were talking a little bit about it after the game, one of Herscher's standout running backs. And he was, and I got the sense from talking to him about it that, while it would have not been a great thing for them to lose that game, the fact that they were able to rally, do the things that they do after having that happen to them might turn out to be a really good thing for them moving forward. The fact that, hey, a bad thing or two can happen, but we'll be all right. We can still do this. The confidence boost that they may have gotten from that rally could turn out to be huge.
I'm with you, and man, it sounds like nobody could stop Reed Laird, the wide receiver down the stretch. He ends up with 150 yards. Tanner Jones, the quarterback, goes for over 200, and I think after Tanner, passing-wise, kind of didn't have quite the year he had as a sophomore, for him to have a big game like that in the first game of his senior year is huge. But, I didn't get to talk to Coach Mosier as much as I wanted to at McNamara Saturday. Kind of got a little distracted when I saw Bradley assistant Coach Joe Kubel, whose cousin was coaching at Lawrenceville. Ended up getting a little sidetracked. But, yeah, from what I heard about the Tigers, sounds like they really like their offensive and defensive lines. A lot of the same kids going both ways. That line now being coached by a guy you know very well, John Wakey, a Hall of Fame coach who come back into the fold. They just put the pressure on up front, offensively and defensively, just kind of wore the Little Giants out. And that is what I was told kind of led to that comeback being able to happen. It started up front. And I'm really curious, going back to that matchup with Bishop McNamara, how that battle in the trenches is going to go. We saw the Irish skill guys last week have a really big game. Now the Tiger is going to look to neutralize that a bit, especially with their size advantage up front.
Moving forward now, this was another game that I felt like I'm not really surprised by who won it. It's kind of surprised by the score. Mantino put up a ton of points in their win over Sandwich and seemed to do it pretty quickly. So, Mantino was kind of a little bit of a wild card coming into the season. I was curious as to how they might replace some of their big guys up front. I knew they had some speed. I know they had some skill players that were coming back for them. But that kind of offensive performance against what has traditionally been over the last couple of years a pretty good Sandwich program, I thought that was a really strong opener for Mantino.
Yeah, hey, two years in a row that the Panthers have dropped a 54-piece against Sandwich, which is crazy to drop the exact same amount of points when you get that high. Man, Connor Harrod, what can you say about the kid? He's your quarterback, and he runs for 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. You talk about all those skill guys they got back, didn't even really need to use any of them. And it was all a bunch of new guys up front doing a lot of blocking to set up those holes. So really good first week for Coach Haynes and the Panthers. I'm sure that they weren't thrilled seeing the defense give up 30 points. But offensively, man, if you can put up 50 in a week 1 game, no matter who you're playing, to show that you're kind of that engaged on that side of the ball early. Now hosting a Plano team who struggled a little bit against Ottawa last week, struggled to stop the run against Ottawa last week. You got to feel your chances going into the conference season at 2-0.
Piatone made a long trip down to Granite City. It was a situation where, the Blue Devils had to find a game and took this one with a much bigger school, but a school that has really struggled over the last couple of years, collecting victories, keeping teams from scoring points. Piatone had no problem. So, it was a long trip, well worth it for the Blue Devils as they moved to 1-0. A schedule gets a little bit more interesting this week for the Blue Devils. What appears to be a pretty solid Marengo team at home. At least they don't have to make another long road trip. But Piatone with a lot of questions to answer. Seems like they answered a few of them against Granite City, but still have some more to kind of maybe resolve heading into this week 2 game.
Another really, really good, intriguing matchup here with Piatone going up to Marengo. Do want to give a shout out to Coach Tully Siamis. Became the Piatone all-time coaching wins leader with 53 wins last week. So congratulations to him. Really good dude. Tucker Kane's a kid who came in, and he did a lot last year as a junior, and they're like, hey, man, we're a really junior-heavy team. You're one of the few seniors. We need you to really step up and be the man for us. And 3 rushing touchdowns last week, a fierce defender at linebacker. I think he did that. And I'm real curious. Marengo's a respectable program, a nice win against Stillman Valley. I think that's going to be a real fun matchup up at Marengo this weekend.
Reed Custer hung in there pretty good, I thought, with a pretty solid El Paso team. before falling by 2 touchdowns. I thought that was a good step for them. El Paso, a playoff team last year. Reed Custer hung in there. They were in the contest for most of the game. Ended up losing by 2 touchdowns. But I think they move into week 2, even though they're coming off a loss with a little bit of confidence, playing a Harvard team that has struggled over the last couple of years, lost to a team out of Wisconsin with the intriguing name of Bigfoot last week, but did not score in that game. So I think this is an opportunity maybe for Reed Custer to even up that record at 1-1.
Yeah, I think so too. And I really liked, kind of in the same vein as Watseko, where they moved the ball pretty well. They just couldn't get into the end zone as much as maybe the yardage would reflect. I know they had a handful of different kids, had 40, 50, 70, 80 yards, whether it be rushing or receiving. So they put the yardage up, just couldn't quite sustain drives and finish them. I think coming home again, like you said, against a Harvard team that struggled a little bit against Bigfoot last week. I think this is a great chance for Coach Turek and them boys out in Braidwood to get that first win under their belts and get a little bit of momentum picking up into an Illinois Central 8 conference season that I think through at least 1 week, and we might see that even more so this week. I think the ICE conference might be a little bit better top to bottom maybe than a lot of people might have thought to start the season. A little bit of depth to the conference this year, I think.
Yeah, I can totally see that in terms of the depth and top to bottom. With Streeter getting a win, and everybody just kind of lining up there, I think a lot of these games are going to be challenging for teams on a week-to-week basis, and it's going to be another one of those leagues where I feel like on Friday night, 2 or 3 of the league games are going to be the ones where you're looking at it in the fourth quarter and saying, you know what, that could really go either way. So I think that's going to be a fascinating conference race. Obviously, everyone's still chasing Wilmington, but I think that middle pack, Wilmington and then Coal City is, obviously, kind of lockstep right behind them. But that middle pack, I think, is going to produce some fascinating games this year. And I think you'll also have some teams, kind of nipping at the heels from the behind. So it'll be very interesting to see how that shakes out. It wouldn't surprise me to have a couple of weeks this season where you look at the result and say, that was interesting. Like just in terms of, maybe not an upset win, but hey, they needed a touchdown in the fourth quarter to get away from that team. And that's just one of those things where I think it's good for the league when you have that kind of balance where you're getting a challenge every week and you're not either kind of getting yourself in a point where they don't feel like you can win that game and that it's going to be competitive. So let's close out with a couple of with our 2 8-man teams here. St. Anne Cardinals off with a good strong win in week 1. MCP also getting a victory. So the 2 8-man teams off to good starts.
Yeah, it's very quickly become a situation where St. Anne come in year 3. They're already a team that you don't want to have to see on your schedule. That's a Martinsville team who, while not quite as good as they've been in prior years, that's still been one of the most consistently solid teams since the 8-man football association began here in Illinois. And that was a 30-0 Cardinals victory, just convincing, dominant win on the road. Grant Pomeranski didn't throw an incompletion. He ran for a touchdown. Quentin Thompson caught that touchdown from Grant, also ran one himself. Coach Alan Rude was telling me they've got to figure out whether it be to graduation, and then they lost another one to a transfer down to Missouri. If they can figure things out in their front, we'll call it 3.5. They go usually 3 linemen and then a tight end, maybe a second tight end if they want to go in a kind of more powerful package. But he told me if they can get things figured out up there, they'd be all right. It seems like, judging by a 30-0 win, that might be the case. And now they play a Meridian team who, correct me if I'm wrong, is just coming over from 11-man football, correct?
Correct. Yes. Yeah, they're making the transition this year. This is their first year in 8-man football.
And they struggled down in South Fork last week, but it's always curious to see that adjustment period going from 11 to 8, and it's really such a different game. So we'll see how that's a really intriguing matchup, and as is Milford Cissna Park hosting a St. Thomas More team that really for a couple of years there became like kind of one of those powers, and the Bearcats obviously have been there from the jump as the first ever IAFA state champions. I think if you're the Bearcats, Dirk Snookum threw for over 100 yards and ran for over 100 yards, which he did almost every game last year. That's something that they expect, but a bunch of other kids stepped up that have bigger roles this year. A kid like Jace Comstock catches a couple touchdowns. They have a lot kind of like skill guys that they need to replace and some guys up front. Like this is a kind of one of the biggest turnaround years that Coach Schwartz has had in the 8-man football era of Milford Cissna Park football. And they didn't play exactly a world beater in Peoria Heights last week, but they were able to do enough to be like, all right, hey, we feel pretty good about the way things are starting off this year. And should be an interesting one against a St. Thomas More team that had to play one of the state semifinalists last week in Pawnee. And they're going to be hungry for a win, but I really like this Bearcats team. I think our 2 8-man teams both can have nice years this year.
All right, Mason, what do you have? I think I know the answer to this, but what do you have on the docket for week 2?
Oh, you already know where I'll be. Bishop McNamara at Herscher. Anytime that game's going to be played, it's going to be tough to argue against that being the biggest game around. But man, this is a huge week too for our area. Some of the games, whether it's that one, Crete, Monee, and Bradley, I think is a hugely underrated game in the state landscape. Kankakee's going to try and do what they could do against Lincoln Way East. That Cole City Richmond Burton game, Piatone Marengo, I think in the smaller school, level, that could be a banger of a game. I think this week 2 slate is a real juicy, real interesting one for our area.
Yeah, I'm debating what I want to do now. I might end up going to one that you didn't even mention there. I might go to the Central Moments game. I have a couple of reasons for doing that. Central is also inducting former coach Dean Capel into the school's Hall of Fame. I've known Coach Capel for years and years and years, and it would be nice to see him as well. So I'm considering that one. I might also pop up at your game as well. So I don't know what's going to go on, but I'm going to get something in, that's for sure.
Those aren't too far apart. You could make it kind of a twofer.
Double dip. Yeah, double dip maybe. So, all right. Well, I'll figure that out as time goes along, and we'll catch you next time here checking out Kankakee area football. Thanks for joining us.